So I will get started. Well, thank you for joining us. I'm Sue Atkins. I'm the Associate Director of Employer Relations here at Tufts University. As part of the Career Center, we do a variety of workshops, and we're excited during this Women's History Month to have leadership careers for women in the U.S. Navy. My father was actually in the Navy, so I'm excited for this topic today. It's something that he's talked about very fondly. But really wanting to learn more from our alum. We're really excited to have a jumbo with us to share her experience to some current students. And so I'll just go into some introductions and then we'll head into our questions. So Grace Bambushew is a graduate of Tufts Engineering, class of 2013. She had her bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering here at Tufts. And then after graduation, she was commissioned as an officer in the Navy through the candidate school in Newport, Rhode Island, as a surface warfare officer with a nuclear focus. She served 6 years of active duty in the Navy, including deployments on the guided missile destroyer USS Spruance, as well as the aircraft carrier USS Theodore Roosevelt. Grace transitioned out of the Navy in 2019 and now works in San Diego as an industrialization engineer at ASML, a semiconductor technology company. So thanks for joining us, Grace.
Yeah, of course.
And Lieutenant Kristina Oberst grew up in Greenwich, Connecticut, and graduated with a degree in systems engineering from the U.S. Navy Academy in 2014. She reported to Pensacola, Florida for flight school in the summer of 2014. And she earned her wings of gold in May 2016 and reported to Jacksonville, Florida to fly the mighty MH-60R Seahawk helicopter, which is pretty cool. At sea, she deployed with the USS Normandy, the USS Layson, and USS Harry S. Truman, flying missions in the Mediterranean Sea, Arctic Ocean, Arabian Gulf, North Atlantic, and Caribbean Sea. She accrued over 1,000 hours in model in the MH-60R helicopter, flying tour with the HSM-72. Lieutenant Oberst reported to her short tour with Navy Talent Acquisition Group in New England in August of 2020. And now she's an officer recruiter with the Navy. So we're great to have you both joining us here and look forward to chatting with you both. Anything that I missed in those introductions that you want to add before I head forward with some questions?
No, not for me.
No, all good for me. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks again. So, talking about your backgrounds, right? Both kind of in the engineering space, tell us kind of where you're from originally and how did you decide on your kind of degree program and where you wanted to go in terms of your studies?
Sure, I can go first. So I'm originally from New Hampshire. I grew up in a town called Stratham, which is really close to Exeter. You may have heard it, or Portsmouth, the seacoast area. When I was in high school, I did a summer camp that was called the Advanced Studies Program at St. Paul's School in New Hampshire. And it's specifically geared towards public school kids who are, interested in higher education and maybe kind of getting a first step up towards that. So I did that, and I actually studied artificial intelligence, and that was the first opportunity that I had that really started to pique my interest in engineering. So from there, I decided to pursue applying to some engineering schools along with some liberal arts schools when I was ready as a senior in high school. And so I settled on Tufts because Tufts has a really great engineering program, but they also have a really great liberal arts program that I felt safe as a fallback in case I couldn't do engineering. I could at least, they have a really easy transfer program between the schools. And so that's why I ended up going there. Plus I love Tufts. I love, the campus and Boston, and it just was a really great fit for me. So that's how I ended up, at Tufts Engineering. Does that answer the full question?
Yeah, that's perfect. No, okay. That's great. Kristina, how about you?
So I'm a little bit of a different path. I didn't go to Tufts. I went to the Naval Academy, like Zach had said. I'm originally from Connecticut. And when I was a sophomore or junior in high school and started researching colleges, it was the year 2008. There was an economic recession going on, which looking into how to pay for college was, it did influence my decision a little bit, since I knew that I would have to take out loans if I did go to civilian college. I came across the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, since that was only about an hour and a half away from where I lived. We had visited there for some hockey games and events throughout the years. So I had been there, but I really didn't know what a service academy was. I didn't understand that it was a 4-year college. And when I started looking into it, and I realized that tuition was $0 and also that you would get paid while you're there and have a guaranteed job when you graduate, all of those factors did play a role in looking into the service academy seriously. And then on top of that, just sort of looking for an opportunity to serve and be a part of something bigger than just myself, really drove me towards focusing on the service academies in particular. And when I visited the Naval Academy, it's in Annapolis, Maryland, and I just really fell in love with the area. And I also did a week summer camp type thing when I was a junior called Summer Seminar, where you spend a week at the Naval Academy and sort of experience some sample classes, as well as some of the physical events like obstacle courses, things like that. And I really fell in love with the place there and knew that that was the place for me. While I was there, I always wanted to study engineering, and I ended up choosing systems engineering, was what it was called when I did it. Now they've changed the name to robotics and control engineering, which tells you a little bit more about what it is. It's the same program, but they just changed the name since systems was pretty vague and can be defined differently depending on the school. So that's what I focused on. And then I went to flight school after that, which we'll probably talk about more later.
Yeah, that's great. So obviously this career panel is focused on, leadership in the Navy. And, as you think about your studies and, your background, what things did you get involved in that helped kind of build and strengthen your leadership skills as you move forward in your career and got into the Navy as it were? Do you want to take that, Grace?
Sure. So something that I was kind of always involved in growing up was team sports. So I played team sports through high school, and then when I was at Tufts, I played club soccer. And I think that really helped in, early development of leadership skills and working as a team and obviously building on that. Something else that I did that's kind of specific to Tufts was I was part of the STOMP program, which is the Student Teacher Outreach Mentorship Program, where they give students the opportunity to go into classrooms or in the greater Boston area and give lessons about engineering, utilizing mostly like Lego engineering, Lego robotics. And so I did that for, I think, 3 years at Tufts, which, was a really great opportunity because it could kind of just get thrust into a classroom setting. As a teaching major, this was something that was very unfamiliar to me. And I think that really built a lot of skills that I ended up using later on in a leadership role in the military as well.
Awesome. Great. Kristina?
Yeah. She stole what I was going to say. Team sports. So I would say definitely helped prepare me for leadership roles. At the Naval Academy, everyone has to do a sport. So regardless of whether you're, club, intramural, or varsity athlete, everyone is doing something from like 4 to 6 p.m. that's involving physical sports in some way. I had played club ice hockey at the Naval Academy, and that definitely, like Grace said, the teamwork was a big aspect of learning how to work together. We also had classes very specific, since it is the Naval Academy, We had Leadership 101, we had ethics for the junior officer, we had all sorts of book studies that ended up playing a role as well.
Awesome. So when you started to think about your career paths in the Navy, what kind of influenced that choice? You know, did you have someone that was a particular role model or mentor to either of you as you thought about taking that next step? I'd love to hear more about that.
We had someone called a company officer. So I realize all of what I'm talking about is very specific to the Naval Academy. So I apologize for that, but that's just my experience. So I'm glad Grace is here to talk about the Tufts experience as well. But our company officer at the Naval Academy was a lieutenant in the Navy, which is what rank I am now. And he was responsible for sort of guiding us in both our academic success and also outside the classroom, like our leadership preparation. Ours that we were assigned he was a helicopter pilot. He flew the same helicopter that I ended up flying and talked very favorably about his experiences flying. I just want to mention, I had no aviation experience before flight school. So I had never flown anything. I didn't have a private pilot's license or anything like that. The Navy taught me all of my flying experience, but I loved the idea of it before I got into it, and I just couldn't wait to try. So hearing about the missions he flew, that was a big influence for me.
Great.
For me, I would say, so the first part of the question was what influenced my choice. I would say the biggest influence on my choice to join the Navy was honestly monetary motivation. You know, Tufts, as we know, is a pretty expensive private school. And so I was trying to figure out, you know, in my sophomore year, how I'm going to, you know, graduate and be able to pay for the tuition. And so something that you didn't think of as like an 18-year-old, and then, you know, you start to realize as you go through. So I was applying for scholarships, and then I happened to actually contact a recruiter that works in the same office that Kristina works at now. And I think the reason that I was like interested in the Navy in particular was because of the program that they were talking to me about, which was called the Newport program back in the day. I don't know if it's still called that, Kristina.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So basically the Newport program is a program that specifically tries to find, you know, high performing engineering students to go into the nuclear pipeline, they call it, which is the track towards a nuclear career specifically. And so I was really interested in that because it would obviously really utilize the engineering skills that I was learning at school, and then also give me the opportunity to travel around the world. I've been on 2 deployments. You know, I've seen a lot of different countries that I never would have been to if it hadn't been for the Navy. And then obviously the leadership aspect as well. You know, it really gives you the opportunity to be a leader pretty much immediately as soon as you join, which can definitely cause some growing pains, but, you know, you have to learn quickly and it really makes you grow as a person. So I would say, yeah, that's kind of the influence in the career path was the career path itself I was very interested in. And then as far as female role models, I don't know if I can point to anyone in particular that influenced me towards this career path. I'm not from a military family or anything. Tufts isn't a super military school. So it was kind of an independent decision that I made. But I will say, like, you know, classic answer, like my mom is a very independent person. She, you know, was a single mom and raising 3 kids, and she was financially independent, and she just kind of instilled that in me, really, to be able to stand on my own 2 feet. And so when I was presented with this opportunity where right out of the gate I would be able to do so, I kind of, you know, took that and just the life lessons that she'd instilled upon me to go for it.
That's awesome. So talking about kind of your most recent role in the Navy. Maybe talk a little bit more about, what that was like. What did you do? And, how did you prepare for that position?
I'll go first. Before I was an officer recruiter, I was flying helicopters. This one in the back, that's what it looks like. And the role technically was called helicopter aircraft commander. So it took a lot to get to that point, but that means that as the aircraft commander, I was solely responsible for the completion of the mission and also the well-being of the crew. So our normal missions would be surface surveillance in nature, meaning we would launch from the back of a ship. Most recently, it was a destroyer. And we would fly around and identify all the contacts in the area that were in the vicinity. So when I was in the Arabian Gulf, bordering, like Iran was to the north, and depending on where we were, it could be like Oman to the south. And we would just identify any surface contacts, which is just a fancy word for ships in the area, and report that to the ship that we came from. So telling them, oh, we have, whether it's a cargo ship or a fishing boat or another military's Navy ship in the area, we would just report all of those contacts down to our ship so that they could both safely navigate in the area and also just be in a position to be ready for any kind of communication that they need to get ready for, or just be aware basically of what's around. That's what we did on a pretty regular basis. And then sometimes we would do sort of more specific missions, whether it was submarine surveillance, you could call it. So we would use sensors in our aircraft to search underwater for submarines in the area. And like I said, there's a lot of training that went into it before we got on deployment. So the Navy taught me how to do that exactly, but a lot of simulators. So you're flying in like a box on the ground. You're not actually flying, but you practice all of those skills a lot before you actually do it in the Arabian Gulf or the Caribbean or the Arctic, wherever we were. So that was what my most recent role was. I'm sure Grace has fun stories. We call them sea stories. So.
Yeah, I would say, I think that the Navy kind of has like like a cumulative path, right? So for each position that you're in, you have some kind of training to lead you up to that position. So for, starting at the beginning, going to OCS, which is Officer Candidate School, for me, it was, a 12-week intensive program where you're completely immersed, and it's almost like boot camp for officers. You're immersed in the discipline aspect. So, you do get yelled at, and they make you do push-ups, and, like they do drill practice with rifles and stuff, but then you also take leadership courses. And then by the end, it kind of culminates into an opportunity where you're able to help guide the new class in, and you become kind of a leader yourself. And then you go to your ship, and you are, or, whatever your first assignment is, and you are using the skills that you learned, at OCS to kind of take you through the first couple of months of your first tour, and then you kind of get your footing, and you have people helping you along the way. Of course, your chief, who's like a senior enlisted person who has just been in the Navy for a really long time. They know so much, have so much experience, and they're kind of there to help guide the new officers as they learn how to basically be in that position. And then you have your peers, you have your leadership, and everybody tries to guide you and help you along the way. And then you use that skill set that you learned and take it to your next duty station, and you build upon that. And then that kind of keeps going and going. For me in particular, obviously with the nuclear aspect of it, there's a year-long training. So there's 6 months in the classroom, and then 6 months on what we call a prototype, which is it's literally just an old nuclear submarine that just sits there, and you're able to actually turn the valves and actually operate the plant, and you learn how to do that. And then you go to your nuclear ship and you are, you know, able to use the skills that you learned at Power School and Prototype to actually operate a real operational nuclear vessel. And so all along the way, there's going to be huge learning curves and things that you've never done before, but you have an entire support system to help guide you through that, and, you know, whatever training that you have to build upon. So I would say that's pretty much, no matter what pipeline you choose, pipeline being like pilot, SWO for me, you know, nurse corps, whatever pipeline you choose, I'd say that's generally how the training aspect of it, or the, you know, how to get prepared, that will go in each of the pipelines is very similar.
Okay, great. Well, I want to pause and give our student Taylor an opportunity to see what questions she might have, and I have a few more, but I figured we'd see what things might be resonating for you. And any questions, Taylor, that you'd like to add at this point or ask our speakers?
Yeah, so this kind of, I don't know, just listening to this, I kind of was thinking about, like, I was wondering how long you are typically in the Navy for, and if it's not something that you plan to do for a long time, is it something that you can do and then apply those skills? Like, I'm in civil engineering, I can like do that and then apply those skills for my civil engineering job later in life. Like, I don't know how that works.
That's a really good question. For the most part, college graduates that go to officer candidate school, like Grace said, will owe the Navy 5 years. So your service obligation will be 5 years in the Navy. There are some differences. For example, aviation, we have a little bit longer of an obligation because we go to flight school for about 2 years. So our obligation is 8 years active duty, but for the most part, it's 5 years on active duty. And if you choose to stay in, you can continue serving in the Navy. But like Grace can talk to you more about the transition out into the civilian world, but you can certainly leave after your obligation is over and then apply to civilian jobs and be a civil engineer in the civilian world.
Yeah, so Taylor, the advice I would give you is, if this is something you're interested in and you want to continue talking to a recruiter, somebody like Kristina, just ask what the minimum service obligation is for the career choice that you have. So yeah, like Kristina said, I'd say on average it's 5 years. As far as transition into the civilian world, I would say that yes, definitely. I mean, the skills that you acquire in the Navy, no matter what you do, will have some kind of a transition and application in a civilian job. For me, I work at a semiconductor technology company right now, and I had no experience with semiconductor technology beforehand, but I had a lot of experience with systems engineering from my nuclear training. And so that translates very well. You know, we have gas systems, we have water systems, we have cooling systems, we have a lot of the same types of systems. They're just configured in a different way to do a different thing. But that translates. As far as civil engineering, I obviously, probably Kristina could talk to this a little bit better, but we have a civil engineering corps and the CBs, and I think those are two different things. I'm not exactly what the line is between them, but there are civil engineering pipelines that you can take in the Navy. I worked with a veteran who, at my current company, he was actually on my team when I first joined, and he was actually transitioning into a city government planning job after having served with the Civil Engineering Corps for 5 years. He kind of took a quick stop at my company, and then now he's moving on to working with the government, the local government here in San Diego. So I know that definitely set him up really well for success there. And so there are definitely options, and the skills that you acquire do translate pretty well depending on what it is that you want to do afterwards.
Yes, we do have a civil engineering corps, like Grace said. There'll be officers that work directly with the CBs, the construction battalions, they'll become like project managers, and they oversee a lot of those projects, whether it's, you know, runways for aircraft or, you know, any kind of infrastructure that we might need in the military. You would be directly in charge of those projects as a civil engineering corps officer. And we also have a collegiate program, so similar to what Grace was talking about with the NUPOC, the nuclear program, where you can get a scholarship essentially while you're at school, or to eventually go serve as a nuclear officer. We have the same thing for civil engineers as well. So if you're interested, you can definitely share that information.
Thank you so much.
And Kristina, just to talk a little bit about kind of the types of majors that you recruit for, right, out of college, and, you know, the person that would assist a graduate with figuring out the right spot for them based on their interests. Maybe walk us through kind of, you know, your profile, and also kind of the process from, you know, recruited, and then what that first few years are like in kind of active duty and getting ready. So kind of maybe walk us through all that picture, so we can get a better sense of that process.
Okay, so the first question about which majors, the short answer is all majors. There's no major that, you know, it's disqualifying for service. We recruit all majors. The caveat with that is that the longer answer is STEM majors are definitely preferred, and you get a lot more opportunities if you are a STEM major, an engineer, for example. There are just a lot more programs that are specifically open to engineers, like whether it's the nuclear propulsion pipeline or civil engineering. And a lot of them require certain classes that someone, like if they majored in English, probably wouldn't have taken in their transcript, like physics, calculus. Those are the main two, but there might be a couple different programs, like computer science, if it's someone that wants to be like a cyber warfare officer, for example. But long answer, the short answer is all majors. And then as far as what to do as far as a program application, if you are interested, we refer to it as a 6-step process mainly. The first of which is becoming medically qualified. That will entail a physical exam conducted by a military doctor. After you're medically qualified for service, there is a test called the Officer Aptitude Rating that almost all programs do need to take. NUPOC is one that doesn't need to take that test. They'll look at different test scores like your SAT if you want to be like a surface nuclear or submarine officer. But everyone else takes the Officer Aptitude Rating exam, which tests mechanical comprehension, mathematics, and reading comprehension. After that, we will do a background check to check for your eligibility for a security clearance. And the rest is mainly paperwork. So we'll collect letters of recommendation. You will write a statement. We call it a motivational statement about why you want to be in the Navy as an officer. And lastly, we'll look at your official transcripts. So those are the main 6 steps of the application process. And all of that will make up your application that we will send to a board, which is just a panel of senior naval officers in whatever field you're applying to. So for example, if you want to be a pilot, it would be senior pilots looking at your application. And they read through all of those documents. You don't appear in person or interview for these programs. You would just basically present yourself on paper and they will vote on it. And then if they offer you a commission, you can either accept or decline at that point. So throughout the whole application process, there's no obligation to serve. That will come after you've gotten accepted and you decide that that's what you want to do. As far as the first few years, so for college graduates, you'd be going to OCS, Officer Candidate School, which Grace attended, 12 weeks in Newport, Rhode Island. Like she said, there's physical aspects as well as classroom aspects. you are going to get yelled at. It's like the officer version of boot camp. But it's going to prepare you to commission as an ensign at the end of that. Ensign is the first rank in the military in the officer structure. And after that, your first assignment will really depend on what pipeline, which career you're going to. So for me, I went to flight school. If you're either a pilot or naval flight officer, that's where you go down to Pensacola, Florida to start that training. Surface warfare officers go to a basic division officer course, and then they go to their ship. Grace went to nuclear power school, I believe, right? In Charleston, South Carolina. And civil engineers would go to like an intro course for civil engineer corps before being assigned a construction battalion like we talked about. So it really depends on what your specialty is as far as what those first assignments look like. But like Grace said, everything is kind of like a crawl, walk, run. So they'll teach you how to crawl before you walk, before you run, as far as all of the skills that you need to do your job.
That's great. Thank you so much for laying that out so clearly so people can have a sense of that pipeline. Taylor, I didn't want to jump in and ask a next question unless you had some other question from as a result of those answers and information.
This is like kind of separate from what we've been talking about, but I was wondering, in relation to it being Women's Month, I was wondering if you have experienced any sort of gender discriminations or inequalities related, I don't know, to who you are as a person.
I'll jump in. I think one of the unique things about serving in the Navy is that, well, first of all, it's a volunteer force and we need both women and men to fill those roles. The Navy recognizes that, and there's actually a push for increased, female representation at all ranks and all jobs. Every single job in the Navy is open to women. One of the unique things is that we get paid based on our rank and not our gender. So that can't be said for all civilian jobs out there, I know. But I think that proves the Navy does value both women and men equally. As far as discrimination because of my gender, not any recent people that I've served with. I think the only kind of discrimination can sometimes come from like older veterans that didn't serve with women alongside with them. In my experience, I was expected to do the exact same job that a male pilot in my squadron was, and it really didn't matter that I was a female. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I didn't particularly experience discrimination while I served. It's more like some attitudes that I've heard from veterans that didn't serve alongside women.
Yeah, I'll try to tackle that one as well. It's a tough question, but a really, really important one. I would say in my own experience, I think similar to what Kristina was saying, I can't think of a time where like anybody was like, you can't do this because you're a woman, right? I don't think anyone would ever come right out and say that. So it's more about the very subtle, like reading between the lines interactions that you have with people. And I think how that happens in the Navy is probably very similar, to how that happens in regular life as well. Being a woman in the engineering field in general, you're already a minority. And I think that we deal with very I think they call it like microaggression, micro discrimination on a daily basis. As far as my interactions in the Navy, there were a couple times, for example, in nuclear power school, you have to go around and do something called get checkouts, which basically just means that you're given any topic, you have to go around and prove that you have knowledge about this topic, and then somebody signs the line item and then you can move on to the next thing. It's basically a way that they can track on paper like that you've actually studied like every single thing that they want you to cover. And my partner in my checkout buddy, that we called it, was another woman. And we were like at the top of our class. We were set to graduate first and second. And because of that, we experienced a lot of backlash actually from our peer group, who was all men. And they were basically saying like, oh, well, the only reason that you're getting checkouts is because you're women, and people want to give you checkouts because they just, you know, whatever, it's preferential treatment, which wasn't true, because on paper, on our tests, you know, we also had the highest grades, and that involved no interaction with other people. And we also tried, you know, we were out there all the time asking people, getting denied all the time, but we were just, you know, kept going back. And so it was frustrating because I felt like we were really putting in a lot of effort, and the result of that effort was basically somebody writing off our effort saying, oh, you know, well, that's only happening because, you know, you're a woman, you're only at the top of your class because you're getting preferential treatment. So that was the only time that I really felt like, oh, like, okay, this is, you know, pretty blatant. And other than that, everything else has been pretty good. The one thing that I do think is a very important life lesson, you know, that I learned in the military, which is that women like really, you know, it just like really instated in me how important it is to support other women. And you know, I was so lucky because all of my female peers I was really close friends with. They were so smart, so brilliant, so like easy to work with, great leaders. And I really saw, you know, role models in them, like even in my peer group. And I think just being able to support each other really kind of helped us all grow as, you know, individuals, but also like we gave really good impressions as female leaders in general. So thanks.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that, Grace. I think it's really helpful to share that experience for sure, even though it's not easy. Taylor, other questions before I get, no? Okay. So my next question is really kind of a highlight, right? As you think about your experiences with the Navy, I'd love to hear kind of what's been one highlight that you would put a spotlight on in your experience that you've had.
Sure, I can go. One highlight, wow. I would say the highlight for me would be the incredibly strong relationships that you build with people that you serve with, especially you know, your deployment friends, I'll call them. You go on deployment and you're completely isolated from your family, from your friends, from your home, from your spouse, you know, and you're kind of out there doing the mission, and you know, kind of as a result of that, you're also spending so much time with your peers. You have breakfast, lunch, and dinner together. You work out together. You work together. You know, you literally sleep in, you know, we have on the ship, we had one bunk room for all of the female junior officers, the nuclear junior officers. And so it was like such a solidifying experience to spend all of that time together. You bond together, you go out on liberty, which is when you get into port, and you go out and you stay in a hotel room together. And from that, I have some of my best friends, you know, that I've ever made, and we're still friends to this day, despite the fact that a lot of us have moved to different locations. By the nature of the military, you have to move around the country a lot. So I have friends on the East Coast, I have friends in the South, I have friends, you know, in Northern California and Washington, and I'm here in San Diego, and I still feel extremely close with all of them. You know, we still talk all the time. And so I would say, excuse me, I would say that that is probably like the highlight of my Navy experience, is just having formed those friendships and those bonds, and they really do like last a lifetime.
Fantastic.
Along those same lines, I I sort of talked a little bit about it, but my most recent deployment, we left in September of 2019. We were supposed to come back in April of 2020, but as you know, that was right at the start pretty much of COVID pandemic. So we ended up staying until June. So we got extended. We just kept getting extended. First, they'd say it's going to be a couple extra weeks, then it's going to be an extra month, then it's going to be another month. So it was very difficult. Morale was very difficult at that time on the ship that I was on. But as a result, like Grace said, we really did bond in a shared sort of negative experience. But along with that, I think probably my favorite moments from that deployment, as officers, you're always going to be in charge of leading other people. So I was an officer responsible for about 20 people, the aviation maintenance department on the ship. So all the people that work on the helicopter. And out of those 20 or so enlisted technicians, we had probably about half of them re-enlist while we were on deployment, which was really cool to see, especially when, like Grace said, deployment, you're isolated from your family. You can email and call them when you're in port, but besides that, you're really just spending time with your Navy family as it becomes. And the fact that so many of them, even through that sort of difficult experience, raised their right hand again and decided to sign on for more years. That was like humbling to be a part of and to see that they were also willing to continue to serve. And as the officer, we get to swear them in again. So when I look back at the pictures, we did so many like re-enlistment ceremonies. And I think those were the highlights of that deployment for me, because I just saw like all these really young 18, 19-year-old sailors that wanted to keep serving. And that was just the highlight for me.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, we have sadly run out of time for our panel today. I just want to thank both of you so much for joining us and sharing your experiences and your insights with our students. And we will put this recording on our YouTube channel for the Career Center. That usually takes a couple days. But certainly, Taylor, if you have other questions, I can, share, obviously, Kristina, your contact information with her. So feel free if you would like that, Taylor. I'm happy to send that along to you. But thanks again, Grace, and also glad to connect with the Jumbo. I hope you enjoy your time in San Diego. I live there as well and love it so much. So hope it's fantastic out there. And yeah, stay connected with us, of course. And just want to thank everyone again for joining the Career Center's panel today. And thank you so much to our speakers, and look forward to future events. Take care to you both. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Have a great day.